You guys are ready to be Jatayu? Okay, let's move forward. This journey of Anuj, Vinod, Nupur, me, and every one of you is a collective one. So see it, listen to it as a collective journey. And maybe somewhere our paths cross each other. Please put your hand together for Nupur Sharma.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to World Hindu Congress for getting so many luminaries together. It's a little nerve-wracking to speak here when you know that there are so many people who are listening to you. Now, a little context. When Jithardeep said that 5 degrees less of something, so last night we were all sitting and discussing how this panel would go. And I asked Vikramji if there's any no-go zone during this conference. To his credit, he said, no, there's nothing. It's all good. You can say whatever you want. But I could hear that slight hesitation in his voice, which I hear with everybody when I am about to take the stage. So I said, don't worry, Vikramji. Whatever I say will be 5 degrees less than Sar Tan Se Juda. So we will not go to Sar Tan Se Juda level. Everything we say will be 5 degrees lower. So don't worry. But to his credit and to World Hindu Congress's credit, there was no-go zone, and I was allowed to say anything that I wish. So maybe we should start with that. Now, Yatharji was very generous in his introduction of OpIndia and me. But just to give you some context, I'd like to say that Rahul Roshan is sitting here. He's my CEO, he's my boss, he's my mentor. I was an accidental... I am an accidental journalist because I had no plan whatsoever to be a part of this fraternity. I had no plan whatsoever to be in this stream. One fine day when my baby was 6-7 months old, I think, and I was running my family business, I get a call from Rahul saying that, do you want to do this? I said, I mean, it sounds great, but I have no idea how. I have no background. He said, no, wo sab ho jayega. I'll teach you whatever you have to learn. But do you want to do this? I said, sure. And overnight, I dropped my family business, much to the chagrin of my father. And I joined OpIndia. And the snowballing of OpIndia is a phenomenon that has surprised even me. So I think the first time I truly realized what a crime it was not to be a journalist, but to be a journalist and a media platform that very openly says that we are going to document the crimes against Hindus, was for me personally my experience in Bengal. So when I started working with OpIndia, I was in Bengal. I've been born and brought up in Calcutta. And right smack in the middle of COVID, we get a notice for my husband to be interrogated by the local police. Now, I was wondering why my husband, he's the most innocuous, peace-loving person who's not related to any of this. I thought maybe, he must have gone out to pick my daughter up from school, must have got into a scuffle, who knows. But when he goes there to the police station, we find out that it is about OpIndia, because I had unfortunately used one SIM card which was registered to his name. Now, he was interrogated for hours over certain reports. He said he doesn't know anything because he's not connected to OpIndia. And he came back. And we thought that was that. It was over. The same evening, I get a summons from Lal Bazaar Rowdy Department. Lal Bazaar is the headquarters of Calcutta Police. And we get a summons for my husband and myself for the next day. I call up Rahul and I tell him that, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've never faced an interrogation before. But he said, just go with it. Hopefully they won't beat you up. And if they do beat you up, he urged me to take videos of it. So I go for the interrogation. And for hours we were interrogated. We were asked questions about 3 reports. One was a report where there was a video of a COVID patient being discarded in a residential area in Calcutta. And we had covered that. The other was about an incident from years ago about Azan being played at a Durga Puja pandal. There was a video of it. This was not a figment of our imagination. And the third FIR was about our coverage of the Telinipara riots. In Telinipara, Hindus had come under attack by a Muslim mob. Now, again, I was telling Yatharji yesterday that just so that we don't get censored, we use the word Islamist instead of Muslim. But since Vikramji has given me a free hand, 5 degrees less than Sartan se juda, I will use a Muslim mob instead of saying Islamist. So, Hindus came under attack, and I was essentially interrogated about those reports. In between, the cameras were kindly shut off, and I was told and I was informed about the dire consequences of us not pulling those reports down and us not towing the line, essentially. When we came back, Rahul and I cracked a few dark jokes about me going to jail or me, something worse happening. We cracked a few dark jokes. That's how we cope with all the threats. And we got back to work. Thankfully, Supreme Court gave us a stay. 1 year later, Mamata Banerjee won again. And 2021, the post-poll violence was as brutal as, dare I say, the direct action day. I'd have you know that there's a lot of violence that will never be reported and that cannot be reported. I have spoken to victims who were gang raped, minor victims who were gang raped and thrown on the streets. They took shelter in temples. This went on for days. There were girls who were Hindu girls, minors, who were standing at the side of the road. Muslim TMC workers would drive past on a bike and tear their clothes open. None of us could report this because the victims would not come on record. The police would not file an FIR. The NHRC never got to these victims, sadly, because these victims have no place to go. They have nothing to say. And therefore, these will never be formal reports. When this post-poll violence was happening, I interviewed a girl. She came on video. She covered her face, and she came on video, that brave girl, to talk about her ordeal during the post-poll violence. She said that one day, these Muslim men from TMC came to her house and said, "Hame Hindu ladkiyan chahiye." They forced their way into the house. They gang raped her by holding the father at gunpoint and forcing him to watch. After she was gang raped, and while she was being gang raped, she kept pleading to at least leave her father. The father was beaten and held at gunpoint and forced to watch, as I said. After that, he took off whatever he was tying on his head. He covered her up, and they escaped. For weeks after that, she would wear a burqa before going out in public because she didn't want people to know that she was a Hindu. Because if people knew she was a Hindu, she might have been brutalized again. No FIR was filed for this coverage of mine because the victim was on record. But what happened was that mysteriously, a 4th FIR from 2020 when I was interrogated suddenly surfaced and was ceremoniously handed over to the CID. When it was handed over to the CID and we got the notice, we were told by well-meaning individuals who were in the know and were highly placed that the only safe option for me was to leave my motherland. My motherland because my homeland, because my family has been there for over 100 years. Overnight, my husband, my daughter, and we left Calcutta and we shifted to Delhi. There was a bout of dark jokes again about how we were sad that we might not be interrogated again because that would have made for a good story. But that is the cost you pay for covering crimes against Hindus. We never went back. I never went back to Calcutta. I've been in Delhi for the past 2.5 years. And one needs to understand why this really happens. When you're reporting conflict, when you're reporting strife between Hindus and Muslims, you come from a place where you want to hear all sides. Of course, who wouldn't? We chose a method which was slightly different. Before going to the obvious perpetrators, we went to the obvious victims. And that was the biggest crime we did, according to the liberal global cabal. Instead of asking the Muslim perpetrator, "Aapne aisa kyun kiya?" Like Barkhada did, if you remember. She went to interview a Kashmiri stone pelter, and that Kashmiri stone pelter is screaming, "Maine Islam ke liye kiya, maine Islam ke liye kiya." And she's like, "नहीं, नहीं, नहीं, आपने इस्लाम के लिए नहीं किया, आपने तो कश्मीर के लिए किया, आपने कश्मीर की आज़ादी के लिए किया, आपने कश्मीरी के हक के लिए किया." So our biggest crime was not going to that Muslim perpetrator and understanding the angst because of which he is persecuting and killing and raping Hindus, and going to the Hindu victim and asking, "What happened when you were raped?" Going to the family and asking, "What happened when your son was beheaded?" That was our greatest crime. Since the subject is challenges when you're covering crimes against Hindus, the biggest challenge is, of course, that you're hounded. And since I have only 1 minute left, I have a lot to say. This could probably be a 1 hour speech. But I will quickly go through the challenges that you face. When you're reporting in conflict, I think the biggest challenge is that the victim is unwilling to come on record. The victims are unwilling to come on record for several reasons. As I said, as a woman, you can understand, I can understand why a rape victim would not want to come on record, would not want to tell the world what happened to her. In Delhi riots, Delhi anti-Hindu riots also, a lot of witnesses dropped out. Because during the riots, they had been persecuted, they had been attacked by their Muslim neighbors. Now, if they come on record and become a witness to what happened, they have to live there with their Muslim neighbors in perpetuity. So they don't know tomorrow the same mob can come to them and start beating them up, burning their shops, raping their mothers, their sisters, their daughters. And therefore, for the witness, it becomes very difficult to come on record. That's the first challenge you face. The other is the perpetrators and how their network fuels disinformation. We saw that during Delhi anti-Hindu riots. The conspiracy started on 5th December. There are perpetrators like Tahir Hussain on record saying that the riot happened because we wanted to teach Kafirs a lesson. And the entire global media turned it into an anti-Muslim pogrom. And sadly, we don't have that network. Sadly, the one media house that you're saddled with who spoke about Delhi anti-Hindu riots is OpIndia and other platforms like Swarajya. Beyond that, we don't have a global network. If we think that sometime in the future we'll be able to perfect the art of gathering global support like perhaps the Jews have, you're sadly mistaken. The Jews are still monotheists, you're polytheists, nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is coming to talk about your angst. Nobody is coming to talk about your persecution. The other one is very interesting. Every time there's a crime, the police goes on record to say, "Oh, there is no communal angle." If you remember, in 2021, Rinku Sharma was murdered. He was a Bajrang Dal activist. He was a Bajrang Dal worker. I'll just take 2 more minutes to wrap up. He was a Bajrang Dal worker. He was collecting donation for Ram Mandir. And he was stabbed by a Muslim mob. Dilshad, Faizan, and a few others were arrested, all Muslim names. The police said that there was no communal angle, and the scuffle broke out at a birthday party. And there was a argument about the birthday party. Now, communal angle it's not necessary that the person who's persecuting you is necessarily going to shout Allahu Akbar while stabbing you. On ground, communal strife is built over many, many months and many, many years. It's not that very moment necessarily. So in Rinku Sharma's case, the parents were screaming that he's constantly hounded and threatened by the Muslims of the area. There's a palpable communal strife. There's palpable communal hate in their area because of Ram Mandir. And yet, the police did not pay heed. Yet, the police said that there was no communal angle. Now, the moment the police said there was no communal angle, we went to the ground, we spoke to the family, we spoke to the Hindus of the neighborhood, and all of them told us, this is communal. He was killed because he's Hindu, he was killed because he was collecting donations for Ram Mandir, and that is that. Maybe the scuffle broke out at a birthday party, and the argument was something else when he was stabbed, but he was hated because he was doing what he did. The danger is that when we report that, we start counting backwards and waiting for an FIR. How dare you say there is a communal angle when we have said there isn't? How dare you tell us what the mother thinks? Who's the mother? She's not the police. She's not us. She's not investigating. So that's the greatest threat, that the police takes a cop out by saying that there is no communal angle because they don't want to upset the perennially upset and the perennially offended and the perennially hurt Muslim denomination of our country. The last is the assumption that Hindus cannot ever be victims. We can't be victims because we are more in number. We constitute 80%, I don't know, I'm sure we are not 80%. If you take out the leftists, we are probably 50%, 40%. But the assumption is that Hindus are more in number compared to the Muslims, and therefore we cannot ever be the victims. We are the fascists who are persecuting the Muslims, because of which they are in turn killing us and raping us, because that is the language of the oppressed. We've seen this argument with Hamas. When Hamas went on a rampage against the Israelis and the Jews, it was said that this is the language of the oppressed. You've oppressed them for so long, the poor things, that now they have to kill you, they have to rape you, they have to behead you. How else are they going to express their angst? Sushil ji is sitting here. I'd like to ask him how many Kashmiri Hindus went on a rampage beheading Muslims. I don't think anybody did. They've been persecuted. That's not the language of the oppressed. But that's how the Muslim community gets a pass. So when the assumption kicks in that Hindus cannot be the victims because of their numbers, any crime against a Hindu becomes an expression of the angst of the wronged and an act against the perpetrator itself. So now Hindus have globally become the fascists. And once that narrative is crafted that we are the fascists, our rape, our murder, our mob lynching, riots, our temples being broken, beef being force-fed to women in love jihad cases, all of this is whitewashed because nobody is going to feel sympathetic. अरे आप तो fascist हैं, you deserve this. अगर आप fascist नहीं होते तो ये बेचारे मासूम से मुसलमान जो 1000 साल से यही कर रहे हैं, लेकिन मासूम से मुसलमान जिनके मन में इतनी पीड़ा है, they are so perplexed by how they are being marginalized by the fascist Hindu. ये आपका rape नहीं करते. Now, we are the worst genociders in history, by the way, Hindus. If we are genociding the Muslims, we are doing a bloody terrible job at it because their sankhya keeps increasing every month. So I'm sorry, Hindus, you're terrible fascists. You've utterly failed at being fascists. But the point is that nobody is coming to hear your angst and nobody is coming to hear your persecution because you're by default the persecutor who's been given his due by the Muslim Samaj. And I have a lot more to say, but my time's up. Maybe we can take it up later. But in conclusion, I'll say one thing. There is a lot that we whitewash ourselves as Hindus because we have to. We say Islamists instead of Muslim mob because we don't want Google to censor us. We don't want social media to censor us because hate speech flows only towards the Muslim community. We have historically seen Muslims take to the street and assert their street veto. It is almost as if they are saying, there's a meme, admit that we are peaceful, otherwise we'll behead you. And because of the fear of beheading, you say, Ji Hazur, and you admit that this is a peaceful community. You admit that, अरे ये तो कुछ ही लोग हैं ऐसा कर रहे हैं. Few people give a bad name to the others. 99% give a bad name to the 1%. And what happens is we forget to realize that Islam is not COVID. And there is no variation of Islam. There is no Delta version of Islam. The same Islam that is being followed by ISIS, it's the same Islam which is being followed by Taliban, and it is the same Islam which is being followed by the Indian Muslim. In fact, Deobandi Islam is something that the Indian Muslim has birthed. We've given one of the most extremist, one of the purest forms of Islam to the world. The Hindu community is waiting for good Muslims who will stand up and say, stop killing my Hindu brothers. The truth is, that the good Muslim is only the Muslim who follows his religious doctrine to the T. And if the Muslim follows his religious doctrine to the T and becomes a good Muslim, then he will behead you because you're a kafir. And therefore, the Hindu community is waiting for bad Muslims. Please, bad Muslims, come forward and say that you are not this. This is not Islam. Islam is peaceful. You are peaceful. We are brothers. Please, let's hug, kiss, make up. Let's live in peace. It's not going to happen. You're not living in peace. You're waiting for a civil war, and you say that the civil war is perhaps closer in the horizon that we imagined, because we have a Muslim population, 99% of whom either will behead you or will cheer the ones beheading you. The civil war is right now. It's happening. It's happening already, because even last night, a Hindu conductor was killed mercilessly by a Muslim who then recorded a video saying labaik, saying Gustakhe Rasool ki saza. I don't think the conductor insulted Islam. This was an excuse. But while he was killing the conductor, he said, jihadi abhi zinda hai. We know. Jihadi abhi zinda hai. And if the Hindu community needs to survive culturally, civilizationally, Rahul and I are wired to be pessimists. And therefore, I keep repeating ad nauseum, you're not a pessimist. Rubbish, you're an absolute pessimist. We keep repeating ad nauseum, and I keep repeating ad nauseum, that the Hindu community is documenting our end, and OpIndia is documenting our end. But on a positive note, we also need to realize that every riot, every war against the kafir was started by the Islamist, was started by the Muslim, but it was ended by us. Every time they take to the streets, they kill us for a day, day and a half, 2 days maybe, and then we rise to defend ourselves. So I think the only question in front of the Hindu Samaj today is whether we want to become Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or whether we want to become Gopal Patha. Can I hear the crowd saying, do we want to become Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or Gopal Patha? Thank you.